The latest buzz around the Dallas Cowboys is starting to pick up serious momentum as the draft conversation heats up, and there's one name that keeps coming up in discussions about that first-round pick. A lot of attention recently shifted toward a cornerback who turned heads with an impressive 40-yard dash time at his pro day. And that performance immediately sparked debates about whether he will still be available when Dallas is on the clock. Speed like that always changes the conversation, especially when teams are trying to project how a player will translate to the next level. And suddenly a player who might have been considered a mid-first-round option starts creeping into the top 10 discussion. Whenever these pro day numbers come out, there is always a wave of reactions across the football world. Some people immediately assume a player is now out of reach, while others try to stay more cautious and wait for official numbers and team evaluations. The reality is that every year we see this same cycle play out, where one workout or one measurement suddenly shifts public perception dramatically, even though teams usually already had a pretty solid evaluation based on game film. Still, speed matters, especially for defensive backs. And when a corner shows he can run with anyone on the field, teams start paying even closer attention. The big question now is whether Dallas will actually have a chance to select this player or if he will be taken earlier by a team picking in the top 10. Looking at the teams ahead in the draft, there are several that could realistically target a defensive back, and it only takes one team to fall in love with a player for him to be gone earlier than expected. At the same time, every draft has surprises, and players projected to go high sometimes slide further than anyone expects. That uncertainty is what makes draft season so unpredictable and so exciting at the same time. What makes this situation even more interesting is that the Cowboys have clearly been doing a lot of homework on defensive prospects lately. Reports from various pro days show that the team has been sending important decision makers to watch certain players closely, and that usually tells you which positions they are really focusing on. When top coaches and scouts show up in person, it means the organization wants a closer look, not just at the player's physical abilities, but also at how he interacts with coaches, how he handles interviews, and how he carries himself overall. Those details matter just as much as what happens on the field. One of the pro days that drew significant attention recently was Miami's, where several defensive prospects were being evaluated. The Cowboys had multiple representatives there, which suggests they are seriously evaluating players from that program. Defensive linemen and defensive backs from Miami have been getting a lot of attention from teams around the league, and Dallas appears to be one of the teams doing extensive research on that group. Even when players do not participate in every drill, teams still rely heavily on game film. And if a player performed at a high level during the season, that often carries more weight than workout numbers alone. There are also discussions about defensive linemen who could be options depending on how the board falls. Some of these players did not participate fully in workouts, but their game tape already shows what they can do, and teams often prioritize production and consistency over testing numbers. If Dallas decides to focus on the defensive line instead of the secondary, there could be some interesting options available depending on how the first part of the draft unfolds. That is why so much of the draft strategy depends on what happens before pick number 12, because one unexpected selection can push another talented player down the board. Another interesting name that has been gaining attention is a defensive back who showed strong athletic testing numbers at his pro day. There was some confusion initially about his testing results, but once the correct numbers came out, it became clear that he had a very solid overall performance. He is known for being very physical, especially playing inside as a nickel defender, and players with that kind of versatility are becoming more valuable in modern defenses. Teams want defensive backs who can tackle, cover slot receivers, and sometimes even help in run defense. And that type of role is becoming more important every season. The Cowboys have also been doing their homework on offensive players, including tight ends who could be developmental prospects with high upside. One tight end in particular has drawn attention because of his size and athletic ability. And when you watch his highlights, you can see why teams would be interested. The challenge with some prospects is not talent, but consistency and off-field concerns, and that is something teams spend a lot of time investigating before the draft. Talent alone is not enough if teams are not confident in the player's commitment and professionalism. So interviews and background checks become extremely important in these situations. As the draft approaches, the the Cowboys continue to gather information, attend pro days, meet with prospects, and build their draft board. Every visit, every workout, and every meeting helps them refine their strategy and decide which direction they want to go in the first round. Right now, it feels like there are several different directions the team could go, depending on which players are still available. And that flexibility is actually a good position to be in because it means they're not locked into just one option and can instead select the best player available when their turn comes. As the draft board slowly starts to take shape, another important factor in all of this is how different teams ahead of Dallas are expected to approach their picks. Every year, the first 10 selections usually dictate everything that happens afterward, and one unexpected offensive pick or a surprise trade can completely change which players are available. That is why teams spend so much time preparing for multiple scenarios instead of focusing on just one target. The Cowboys are likely doing the same thing right now, building several different plans depending on how the board falls on draft night. There's also a growing conversation about how this draft class compares to previous years, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Some scouts believe the top defensive talent this year is not as strong as in recent drafts, which could cause offensive players to go earlier than expected. If that happens, it could actually benefit Dallas because it might push a top defensive prospect down the board. Sometimes the best thing that can happen for a team picking outside the top 10 is a run on quarterbacks or wide receivers, because that pushes defensive players further down than expected. Meanwhile, the offensive side of the ball cannot be ignored either, even though most of the recent attention has been on defense. Teams are always looking for playmakers, especially players who can create mismatches. Tight ends, slot receivers, and versatile running backs are becoming increasingly important in modern offenses because they can line up in different positions and create confusion for defenses. That is why you often see teams bring in offensive prospects for visits, even if defense appears to be their biggest need. One thing that always becomes clear during draft season is that teams value information as much as talent. Coaches want to know how a player studies film, how he responds to coaching, how he handles adversity, and how he fits into a locker room. Talent might get a player drafted, but character and work ethic often determine whether he becomes successful in the league. That is why teams send coaches, scouts, and executives to so many pro days and private workouts, because those trips are not just about watching drills. They're about gathering as much information as possible about the person behind the player. As more pro days continue and teams finalize their evaluations, the picture will become clearer, but there will always be uncertainty until the actual draft night arrives. Fans often try to predict exactly what their team will do, but the truth is that even teams themselves do not know exactly how the board will fall. They prepare for multiple possibilities, and when their turn comes, they adjust based on who is available. That unpredictability is what makes the draft one of the most exciting parts of the football calendar. For the Cowboys, the most important thing will be patience and discipline. Reaching for a player too early can be a mistake, but waiting too long for a position of need can also be risky. The best teams usually find a balance between drafting for need and drafting the best player available. If Dallas can stay patient and let the board come to them, there's a very good chance they will have an opportunity to select a very talented player who can contribute immediately and help the team remain competitive next season. Another aspect that could influence the Cowboys' decision is how the depth at certain positions compares to others in this draft class. If the team believes they can find quality players at one position in the second or third round, they might prioritize a different position in the first round where the talent drops off more quickly. This type of strategy is very common in the draft, and it often explains why teams sometimes select a player at a position that fans were not expecting. Inside the war room, the board is built around value, not just immediate needs. There's also the financial side of the draft to consider, which many fans do not always think about. First-round picks come with a fifth-year option on their rookie contracts, which makes those selections extremely valuable, especially for premium positions like cornerback, pass rusher, offensive tackle, and wide receiver. If a team drafts one of those positions in the first round and the player becomes a star, they essentially get an extra year of control at a reasonable price, which helps with salary cap management in the long run. Looking at the Cowboys roster, It is clear that the team is trying to stay competitive now while also preparing for the future. That balance is not always easy to maintain because you want players who can contribute early, but you also have to think about long-term development. Some draft prospects come into the league ready to start immediately, while others need time to develop physically and mentally before they reach their full potential. The challenge for teams is identifying which players are ready now and which players will become stars in a few years. Another interesting storyline is how much importance teams are placing on athletic testing versus game film. Some organizations heavily prioritize measurable traits like speed, strength, and explosiveness, while others focus more on production and consistency on the field. The best evaluations usually come from a combination of both. A player who has great film and great testing numbers is usually a safe first-round pick. But when there is a difference between film and testing, teams have to decide which one they trust more. The pre-draft visits and private meetings will continue to play a big role over the next few weeks. These meetings allow teams to sit down with players, go over film, ask detailed football questions, and learn more about their personalities. Coaches want players who love football, who work hard, and who are willing to improve. Sometimes a player can completely change a team's opinion during these meetings by showing how well he understands the game and how serious he is about his career. As draft night gets closer, rumors will start to increase, and there will be more speculation about possible trades. The Cowboys could stay at their current position, move up if there's a player they really want, or move back if they believe they can still get a good player later while adding more draft picks. Trading back is often a smart strategy if the team believes there are several players with similar grades still available, because more picks give you more chances to find impact players. All of these factors together make the draft process extremely complex, and every decision can shape the future of a franchise for years. The Cowboys are clearly doing their homework, attending pro days, meeting with prospects, and evaluating multiple positions, which suggests they're keeping their options open and preparing for different scenarios depending on how the draft board unfolds. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Whispers are growing louder in league circles, and what once seemed like a straightforward defensive reinforcement plan for the Dallas Cowboys is now taking a dramatic turn. Sources close to the situation suggest the franchise may be backing away from its interest in linebacker Patrick Queen, shifting its full attention toward a more aggressive and arguably game-changing target, defensive end Hendrickson. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.